Hello, and welcome back to True Crime Lounge. This is episode 5, and this is the second season of the podcast. This season, we are focusing on criminals of the Wild West. Before we get started, I do have a Patreon that you can go and help out and support. If you want to, you don't have to, but you can if you want. I also have a merch shop that you can go check out as well. Help a girl out, buy a t-shirt. You might find one you like. There's even a t-shirt pertaining to this season you might want to get. um, you can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. And you can see any updates on my social media as far as that goes. Um, Now, let's dive into today's episode of the True Crime Lounge. Um, this episode is pre-recorded and set to be out November 7, 2023 at 6 o'clock. If you are a member of the Patreon, it will be out the day before, and you can check it out then. So, just a little recap. Our first episode, we talked about Butch Cassidy and his many crimes across the U.S. and Argentina. Our second episode, we spoke about John Wesley Hardin and his serial killer ways. Our third episode, we spoke about Belle Starr and how her case is a cold case still. Our latest episode, we spoke about Billy the Kid and the question whether he deserves a pardon. Now, today's episode we'll be discussing Bill Doolin. First of all, who is he? And what did he do? Well, he obviously was a criminal of the Wild West, of course. But he was born William M. Doolin, who went by Bill or Will Harry. Will Barry, I mean. He was the leader of the outlaw gang that was known as the Doolin-Dalton Gang, the Oklahoma Braves. And the Wild Season, the Wild Bunch. Why does that last one sound so familiar? Well, if you go back and watch the first episode of Butch Cassidy, you will find out. Now, more than 100 years ago in the Oklahoma Territory, members of the infamous Oklahoma's gang squared up against a posse of deputies. This is one of the deadliest confrontations in the history of the U.S. Marshals. By the end of this gunfight, the men were dead and wounded. The people of Ingalls had a vivid picture of the Western lawlessness and the harsh means needed to restore justice. So, let's do some little backstory on Doolin before we get going. He was born in 1858 in Johnson County, Arkansas, to Michael Doolin and Artemina Beller Doolin. When he was 23, he would go west and start working odd jobs until he landed a job as a cowboy at the HX Bar Ranch on the Cinnamon River into Indian Territory in 1881. Now, does that river sound familiar? Well, I also covered that episode. I also spoke briefly about that one, and I want to say it was Belle Starr episode. So, back to the ranch. Well, the ranch was owned by a Texan named Oscar D. Halville, and he instantly took a liking to Doolin and began teaching him how to write and do simple arithmetic. Eventually, he would become an informal foreman on the ranch. Over the next decade, he continued to work as a cowboy, and several other ranches, which was considered trustworthy, and he was considered trustworthy and capable. It was during these 3 years that Doolin was, with other cowboys, outlaws, names of the day. This included George Bitter Creek, Newman, Charlie Pierce, Bill Powers, Dick Broadwell, Bill Tulsa Jack Blake, Dan Dynamite Clifton, and Emmett Dalton. So, by the 1890s, however, Doolin had hooked up with the Dalton Gang, participating in several trains and bank robberies. His first encounter was the law was with the law occurred in 1891 in Coffeyville, Kansas. When he and several friends were celebrating the 4th of July and tapping a keg of beer. However, at the time, Kansas was a dry state, and when lawmen attempted to confiscate their alcohol, a shootout erupted, resulting in 2 lawmen being wounded. Doolin and his cohorts quickly fled the area, with Doolin and then a wanted man, and he began his career as an outlaw over alcohol. On October 5th, 1892, the Dalton Gang made its fateful attempt to rob 2 banks in Coffeyville. In the end, it was a total failure, and Bob and Grat Dalton, Bill Power and Dick Broadwell, all being killed. So only Emmett Dalton would survive to spend the years in prison for the attempt. On the face of it, Doolin didn't participate in the robbery, which spared his life, at least for a little while. However, since that fateful day, some historians have alleged that there was a 6th gang member in the alley holding the horses who escaped. This, though he went to the 6th man who remains a mystery, many speculate that might have been Doolin. Well, so soon afterward, Doolin found another gang, the Oklahoma Braves, which were also called the Wild Bunch in the Oklahoma Lone Riders because of the long dusters that they wore. The group specialized in robbing banks, stores, stagecoaches, and trains in Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma, quickly becoming a terror of the Wild West. The gang included various times with Doolin, Buckeye Redbug, Little Bill Rattler, Bob Grounds, Tulsa Jack, and Little Dick West. Dynamite Dick. Pfft, that's just so funny to say. I don't know why. Weird Dog Tree, better known as Arkansas Tom Jones. Alphonse Bitter Creek, Charlie Pierce, Ollie Yantis, 2 teenage girls known as the Little Britches and Cattle Annie, also followed the gang. Wasting no time, Doolin and his new gang robbed the Ford County Bank at Spearville, Kansas, in November 1st, 1892, getting away with cash and over $1,500 in treasury notes. With no time, a notice circulated of the robber's description. The city marshal in Stillwater, Oklahoma, recognized the description of all, and the posse was sent to go look for him. He was the first of the gang to die when he was killed in a shootout November 29th, 1892, at Orlando, Oklahoma Territory. And on March 14, 1893, Doolin would marry Edith Ellsworth Ingalls of Ingalls, Oklahoma, and Kingfisher. What if she knew Bill was an Indian outlaw? Well, not an Indian outlaw. I mean, an outlaw. There's a song called Indian Outlaw that just popped into my mind. Was an outlaw? Is unknown. But she still chose to. The couple would have a son that they named Jay. So on June 11, 1893, the gang went back to the train again, robbing a train in nearby Cimarron, Kansas, making off about $1,000 in silver. A posse was in quick pursuit, tracking them to the point of Fort Supply, Oklahoma, where guns began to blaze. Doolin was shot and wounded on the left foot. Though he was able to escape and recover, he would limp for the rest of his life. So, in August of 1893, the outlaw gang, including Doolin, Redbug, Bitter Creek, Arkansas Tom, Tulsa Jack, Dynamite Dick, or taking refuge in a small town of Ingalls, Oklahoma. Most of them had been in town for weeks, living in the city hotel, spending their time at Ransom Saloon, when U.S. Marshals got word. Marshals Everett Dumas, E.D. Nix, found a posse in 27 deputies and Indian police headed toward Ingalls. Camping along the creek the night before, they were seen by a young boy who the deputies held overnight. However, the boy slipped away early that morning and ran into Ingalls, telling the outlaws, "The marshals are coming." So with that, I picture like a little boy, like running, saying, "The marshals are coming, the marshals are coming, the marshals are coming." Okay, a little history reference, but okay. Anyway, um, yes. So on September 1st, the posse entered outlaw Ingalls and with intent to capture the gang, and what would be remembered as the Battle of Ingalls. 3 of the 14 men carrying Deputy U.S. Marshal's commissions would die as a result of the battle. 2 citizens would also die, one killed by protecting the outlaws of the Doolin Gang. Newcomb was seriously wounded but escaped, and Arkansas Tom Jones. The killer of the 3 deputies and 1 citizen was captured. He would be sent to prison, paroled in 1910, but robbing another bank. He was killed August 16, 1924 in Joplin, Missouri by police officers. After the shootout, the gang laid low for a while, and it was back to early next year. On January 3rd, 1894, Charlie Pierce and Redbuck held up the store in a post office in Clarkson, Oklahoma. Just a few weeks on January 23rd, the gang robbed a former Citizen Bank of Pawnee, Oklahoma. On March 10th, and the Oklahoma Race robbed the Santa Fe Railroad station at Woodward, Oklahoma, of over $6,000. So, who was E.D. Nix? Well, 2 days later, on March 20th, Marshal E.D. Nix directed his best deputies, the 3 guardsmen, Bill Theismann, Chris Maston, and Heck Thomas. That has to be an interesting name. Heck Thomas. I wonder if his parents were thinking, "Hell, Thomas." It's like, and the mom was like, "We can't say that." So he changed. So how about Heck? And she was like, "You know what? That's a unique name." That's just my theory on that name. Anyway, to take down the Wild Bunch, he would tell them, "I selected you to do your work, and placing explicit confidence in your abilities, to cope with those desperados and put them in living possible." Anyway, um, alive if possible, dead if necessary. So on April 1st, gang members Bill Dalton and Bitter Creek Newman attempted to rob the store of the U.S. Deputy Marshal W.H. Carr at Sacred Heart, Oklahoma. The lawman instantly recognized Bill and reached for his gun. At some point, Newcomb drew his pistol and shot Carr in the wrist. However, the retired lawman wounded Newcomb in the shoulder. Dalton then shot Carr in the abdomen, but though wounded, Carr continued to shoot, chasing the fugitives outside, where They jumped on the horses and fled. The heist continued in the bank robberies of Southwest Missouri on May 10, 1894. That netted $4,000 and left one of the townsmen dead and several wounded. In the meantime, Dalton left the Dalton Gang to form his own gang. He robbed First National Bank of Longview, Texas on May 3rd, 1894. It would be his robbery with his new gang just a few weeks on June 8, 1894. A posse of lawmen approached Bill's home near Ardmore, Oklahoma. Bill, with a pistol in his hand, had jumped and ran toward the posse, including others, to ignoring orders to halt. He was killed immediately, and on December 19, 1894, Doolin was reported one of 6 men who attempted to rob J.R. Pierce at a store in Texana, Oklahoma. So, however, they were driven off with less than $20 of merchandise. So, on April 3rd, 1895, the Oklahoma race without Bill Doolin held up the Rock Island train at Dover, Oklahoma. However, they opened a safe containing some $50,000 destined to the Army payroll. Instead, they robbed the passengers of cash and jewelry. In hot pursuit were U.S. Deputy Chris Maston and a posse who picked up the trail at daybreak. At about noon, Tulsa Jack was standing on the lookout when the posse came upon him. He was shot dead and the gang scattered. So, May 1st, 1895, the gang members, Charlie Pierce and George Okay. And they were killed by in Bitter Creek were killed by bounty hunters known as the Dunn brothers. The hunter team that killed Pierce in Newcomb were older brothers of George Newcomb's teenage girlfriend, Rose Dunn. It was alleged that she had betrayed Newcomb, but it was more likely that the brothers simply trailed her in the outlaw's hideout. So, with 3 guardsmen in hot pursuit of the gang being killed by one, Doolin and Little Dick fled to New Mexico in the summer of 1895. Knowing that his freedom was limited, Doolin made several attempts to surrender in exchange for a light sentence, but his offers were rejected. Later that year, Doolin and his wife were hiding out in Burton, Kansas. It has to be one of the most ironic names I've ever heard for a town. In the meantime, Little Bill Radler was captured on September 6, 1905 by Deputy and U.S. Marshal Bill Tiemann. He would be sent to prison and paroled in 1903. Because of complications from the wound, and then he was captured. He died that following year. So, from Kansas, Doolin and his wife went to Eureka Springs, Arkansas, so that Doolin could take in medical waters. Eventually, his foot would have taken the bullet some years previous, had developed rheumatism. But the detectives Bill Tiemann tracked him to a result in January 1896. The famous lawman single-handedly captured the outlaw at the resort. But offering no resistance, Doolin was taken back to Oklahoma and jailed in Guthrie while awaiting trial. While Doolin and his jailed another gang member was killed, Red Buck Waitman on March 4th, 1896 near Apple Arapahoe Oklahoma Territory by Custer County Posse. But Doolin had a plan. On July 5th, 1896, he, along with Dynamite Dick and 12 others, escaped the Guthrie jail and fled. Doolin took refuge with his wife in Lawson, Oklahoma, and the others escaped be scattered. His freedom would be brief. On August 24th, 1896, Doolin was tracked down, and when he refused to surrender, he was shot and killed by a shotgun blast by Deputy Marshal Heck Thomas. U.S. Marshal Heck Thomas. So, Doolin's body was put on display in Guthrie, Oklahoma. A local photographer made 2 pictures of the dead outlaw. Mrs. Doolin and the brothers composed a poem about the outlaw, in which they printed on postcards and sold it, with people all over them who wanted to buy 25 cents each. The profits were used for burial expenses, but the government actually ended up paying for the embalming and the burial because all the need to preserving the bodies for identification purpose. He was buried in the Boot Hill section of Summit View in Guthrie, Oklahoma. I must find this if I ever make it out to Oklahoma. Doolin's widow filed a $50,000 damage suit against the U.S. Marshals for the unlawful death of her husband, but it was dismissed in February 1897. More than a year later, Dynamite Dick Clifton was tracked down by Deputy U.S. Marshals and was killed in Choctaw, Oklahoma on November 7, 1897. Little Dick West, that's still funny to say, was the last remaining fugitive gang member. He was killed on April 1898 by U.S. Deputy Marshals in Logan County, Oklahoma Territory. So, we talked about stuff leading up to it, but what about what happened with his trial? Well, he was arraigned in Stillwater for murder charges on May 1st, 1896, based on his role in the Battle of Ingalls and the death of 3 Deputy U.S. Marshals. Doolin and earliers agreed to plead guilty in exchange for a 50-year sentence. But when he appeared before the judge who pled not guilty, on his way back to Guthrie, Deputy U.S. Marshal Bill Timon asked Doolin why he had gone back on his word, and Doolin replied with that 50 years was a mighty long time. So, his escape. Well, an escape attempt by Doolin had already been discovered by guards at the Guthrie jail, but on March 10th, 1896, a tunnel discovered at the jail being under the jail wall. Doolin, Bill Radler, Montgomery, and several other prisoners are suspected of digging the tunnel, and the guards turned up with special knives and hidden in the jail. Doolin was housed in one of the more secure cells known as the front cells until the last week of June, when he pretended to be sick and he was moved to the bullpen where several prisoners escaped. The night of July 5th, Doolin stood ready when prisoners George Lane grabbed night jailer J.T. Toll. The only other jailer, Joe Miller, was already built in bullpen. Before Miller could respond, Doolin jumped out the open door, and the bullpen grabbed a revolver. Others inmates had Toll grabbed his gun. 14 inmates escaped from the federal jail, including Doolin, Dynamite Dick. The government has spent $50,000 and lost the lives of 3 U.S. deputy marshals in an effort to capture Doolin, and now the most desperate outlaw in the territory was at large. Doolin and Dynamite Dick were escapees. W.H. Jones fled north from Guthrie, along with the railroad tracks, apparently headed for U.S. Marshals, according to Haynes. They pushed north and east all night and hid in timber the next day. They had crossed the Cimarron River and Doolin may have a ferry across the river, in which the Cowboy Flat from Cow County to combine. By W. C. Ralph, the location of the ferry is described due to go north in present day, near Langston, in a little river, downriver from Pleasant Valley, also known as Cowboy Flats. So, not long after Ingalls battles, Doolin and his gangs were suspected of hiding in Pleasant Valley. During the U.S. Marshals Chris Maston learned that Doolin might be at the David Fitzgerald Ranch, which was located near the Cimarron River. On May 1893, Maston led a posse confronted Fitzgerald and unsuccessful locating the gang. Another member of Doolin's gang, Bitter Creek, had been arrested in the Pleasant Valley. Newman filed a claim that on May 20th, 1891, for the Northwest, adjoining the Fitzgerald Ranch. He relinquished the claim in March of 1892. Other outlaws who held claim to the bend were Zip Wyatt, Little Dick West, Dick Broadwell, and Bill Powers. It is likely that Doolin was acquainted with the outlaw Flats and had sought refuge with the first night of his escape. Deputy Marshals Heck Thomas and Bill Crane were out immediately in their pursuit. Chief Deputy J. Kane sent telegrams to the lawmen in the surrounding area. The U.S. Marshal, Nigel, must have suspected that Doolin would be hideout in Cowboy Flats. He appointed 15 deputies to search Cowboy Flats in the Cameroon River. Deputy Marshal Colered led a posse of gangs himself. Led a posse of gang himself. He made a trip from Guthrie, about 15 miles northeast of Stillwater, looking for Doolin. They camped out overnight, and the next morning, Crane and him heard scuffling around from the campfire. So we stepped on a corn cob and fell, and it was later developed a broke bone on my right ankle. So, according to this tale, basically the fire loaded up spring wagon, westing the pallet of the bedding, and started back to Stillwater. So, escapee C.E. Lawson was captured near Enid by deputies U.S. Deputy Marshal John Smith, who was in question by Heck Thomas, and revealed that Doolin had stated he did not intend to leave the territory without his wife and child. A few days on, August 10th, Thomas read in Enterprise Times newspaper that Doolin's mother-in-law had arrived in Perry with the revolver stolen from jailer Joe Miller. Miss J. W. Ellsworth had delivered Miller's pistol, and Granville Morris, and was located a few miles northeast of Ingalls and situated in the county line between Payne and Pawnee County. This was the border to the Cherokee Strip, and not far from the junction of Arkansas and the Cimarron River. The borders of the Indian Territory, Lawson and Ingalls, were in the remote area where they could have ideal hideouts from outlaws. Dylan and Edith Ellsworth had met Edith when the gang was working in Ingalls. They were married and their son Jay was born sometime in 1894. At that time, it was captured by Doolin's capture was by Bill Tillman on January 1896. Edith and Jay were living with their parents in Lawson. Heck, Thomas, now convinced that Doolin was hiding in the area, and the keys to capture the outlaws were surveillance of the Ellsworth place. Lawson Thomas had the same problem that challenged many lawmen over the years earlier. Local police and I voluntarily through fear assisted in various ways. So, here comes the Dunn brothers. Well, Deputy Frank Canton of Pawnee County had already been to the ranch and made a deal with B. Dunn to capture Bill Doolin. The Dunn Ranch had been a hideout for various members of the Doolin Gang, and the Dunns were suspected of cattle rustling. The Dunn brothers had previously made a deal with Law to help capture the Doolin Gang in exchange for dismissal of charges against them. In 1895, the Doolin Gang members Charlie Pierce and Bitter Creek were killed at the Dunn Ranch. Canton offered a B. Dunn reward for Bill Doolin, and Dunn accepted. But when Hank Thomas arrived and learned of Canton's deal, there was conflicting stories about what happened next. So, one is that Thomas may or may not have applied pressure to Dunn to threat old criminal outlaws. Thomas did offer Dunn and his friends to share the rewards gained from the cooperation. Thomas also have commissioned B. Dunn, a deputy U.S. Marshal's sister Rosa was the girlfriend of Charlie Noble, a young blacksmith in Lawson, but Dunn arranged for Charlie Noble and his brother Tom to assist Thomas in the capture of Doolin. Thomas also had offered his Noble brothers a share of the pie. There are many versions about what actually happened, but I'm curious on what do y'all think about Doolin. But that is it for today's episode. Remember, I do have a merch shop in the Patreon you can go check out as well. And I will see y'all next time as we talk about Sam Bass.